My friends, there are moments in life when you feel like everything is slipping out of your hands. You've prayed, you've fasted, you've believed, but still the answer seems delayed. And in that moment, a whisper from heaven comes, "My child, just relax, everything will come to you." That voice, gentle yet powerful, is not a call to laziness. It's a divine command to trust. Because when God says, relax, He's reminding you that the battle is no longer yours, it belongs to Him. You see, there's a difference between doing your best and trying to play God. Some of us are exhausted, not because of work, but because we're carrying burdens never meant for us. Faith is not proven by stress, it's proven by rest. When you truly believe God is in control, your spirit becomes calm. Even when the storm rages, you might be surrounded by chaos, but peace flows from within you because you know your Father never fails. God's timing is never off. When He delays, He is not denying. Sometimes He withholds what you're asking for to prepare you for what you've never imagined. Your waiting season is not wasted. It's the training ground for your miracle. Let me tell you something. When you stop chasing after what's already promised, it begins to chase after you. Blessings have a schedule. Miracles have a destination. And when your heart is aligned with heaven, everything that belongs to you will find its way into your life effortlessly. So today, stop struggling. Stop forcing what only God can form. Learn to breathe again. Learn to rest again. Learn to smile even before the answer comes, because the one who made the promise is faithful to perform it. When God says, relax, He's not telling you to stop believing. He's telling you to stop doubting. Faith does not fight against time. It flows with it. Faith is the quiet confidence that even if you can't see the way, God has already made one. My friends, your peace is a weapon. Your calmness is a sign of strength. And your trust in God is the bridge between where you are and where you're meant to be. So lift your head, wipe your tears. Don't rush what God is still perfecting. He's saying to you right now, just relax, my child. Everything will come to you in my time, in my way, and for my glory. Faith that waits is faith that wins. This is one of the most misunderstood truths in the life of a believer. We live in a world where everyone wants instant answers, instant success, and instant miracles. But God's kingdom does not operate by speed. It operates by seasons. When God gives a promise, He already has a time fixed for its fulfillment. The problem is our impatience often makes us question whether He is listening, whether He cares, or whether He will really do what He said. Yet every delay is a divine design. Every waiting season has a purpose. God is not trying to punish you, He is preparing you. Think about Abraham. God promised him a son when he was 75. But he had to wait 25 more years before Isaac came during that time. God wasn't silent because He forgot. He was shaping Abraham's faith into something unshakable. Waiting is not wasted time, it's training time. It is in the waiting that God teaches you the language of trust. When you don't see anything moving, when you pray and heaven seems quiet, that's where true faith begins. Real faith does not depend on evidence. It depends on assurance. It is the confidence that even if I don't see it yet, I know my God is working behind the scenes. Many believers today confuse waiting with weakness. They think that if things are not happening quickly, something must be wrong. But faith that wins is faith that endures. Waiting time is not the absence of movement, it's the development of maturity. When you wait, God builds endurance in your spirit. He teaches you to depend less on your own plans and more on His wisdom. The miracle of waiting is that it transforms your heart before it changes your circumstances. God uses the waiting room to purify motives, strengthen convictions, and align your desires with His perfect will. Sometimes you might look at others and see them running ahead, achieving what you've been praying for. You might even feel left behind. But remember, God's timeline for you is not the same as theirs. He knows the pace that will not destroy you. If He gave you everything you asked for too soon, it could crush you instead of bless you. Just like a child cannot drive a car. Before he grows up, you cannot receive certain blessings until your faith matures. The promise is not cancelled. It's simply being customized for the right moment. Faith that waits is not passive. It's active trust. It's praying without complaining, believing without doubting, and expecting without demanding. It's waking up every day and saying, Lord, I don't see it yet, but I know you're faithful. I will keep walking, keep praising, and keep trusting. This kind of faith moves the heart of God. Heaven responds not to panic, but to peace. When you are still before Him, it's a sign that you trust His sovereignty in your season of waiting. The enemy will try to plant lies in your heart. He will whisper that God has forgotten you, that your prayers have expired, that nothing will ever change. But those are the moments when you must hold tighter to His word. Remind yourself that God is not a man that He should lie. Every promise He makes is backed by His own name. If He said He will do it, He will do it. The timing might surprise you, but the result will always glorify Him. Waiting does not mean inactivity. It means inner activity. It's the time to build your spirit, to strengthen your prayer life, to grow in the Word, and to prepare for what's coming. Because when the promise arrives, you must be strong enough to carry it. Many people want the blessing but not the preparation. But God never delivers a miracle to an unprepared heart. The waiting season ensures that when the door opens, you're ready to step through it without fear. Faith that waits is faith that sees beyond the moment. It is the kind of faith that smiles while others worry, that rests while others rush. It's the faith that looks at a barren field and still sees a harvest coming. When you wait on God, you are saying, Lord, I trust your hand even when I can't trace it. I trust your plan even when I can't understand it. And that trust becomes your greatest weapon. Because in the end, the ones who wait on the Lord always rise higher, stronger, and victorious. So, don't be afraid of the waiting season. It's not the end. It's the beginning of something divine. When God finally moves, everything that took years will come together in moments. The wait will be worth it. Faith that waits is faith that wins. Because in that waiting, you're not just holding on to the promise. You're holding on to the promiser Himself. Relaxing is not quitting. It is one of the deepest lessons a believer must learn in the journey of faith. Too often, when people hear the word relax, they think it means to stop trying, to give up, or to lose focus. But that's not what God means when He says, be still and know that I am God. Relaxing is not the absence of effort. It is the presence of trust. It is doing your part and leaving the rest in God's hands. It is walking in obedience while resting in confidence that His plan is greater than yours. When you try to control everything, you become weary. You drain your strength because you're carrying responsibilities that belong to God. Many of us pray for God's will, but then try to manage His timing, His process, and His outcome. We don't realize that anxiety is a form of distrust. The more you try to manipulate the result, the more frustrated you become. But when you relax in faith, you're saying, God, I know you've heard me. I'll continue doing what you've called me to do, but I won't worry about what's beyond my reach. That posture of surrender is not weakness, it's wisdom. Look at Jesus during the storm on the Sea of Galilee. The waves were roaring, the boat was shaking, and the disciples were terrified. But what was Jesus doing? He was asleep. Not because He didn't care, but because He trusted His Father completely. That rest was not a sign of ignorance. It was a sign of authority. It was as if He was saying, storm, you can make noise, but you cannot overturn my purpose. That's what true spiritual relaxation looks like. It's peace in the middle of pressure, calmness in the middle of chaos. Some people misunderstand rest as inactivity, but rest is actually divine alignment. When you relax in God, you position yourself in the flow of His grace. You stop forcing doors open and start allowing Him to open the right ones. When you force things, you may enter places you're not meant to be. But when you relax and trust His leading, you move with divine rhythm. There's a peace that guides you, a confidence that keeps you stable, and a faith that prevents you from making desperate decisions. Relaxing is not quitting. It's changing your posture from striving to trusting. It's doing what God tells you to do today and leaving tomorrow to Him. When you rest in faith, Your mind becomes clearer, your spirit becomes stronger, and your steps become lighter. You start to realize that not everything requires your energy. Some battles are won by silence. Some victories come through peace. When you relax, you create room for God to move. He doesn't work through anxious hearts. He works through trusting ones. You see, quitting is rooted in despair, but relaxing is rooted in faith. When you quit, you stop believing that anything good can happen. When you relax, you start believing that God is still working even when you don't see it. There's a difference between giving up and giving it to God. When you give up, you close the door to hope. But when you give it to God, you open the door to miracles. Think about the farmer who plants a seed. After covering it with soil, he doesn't dig it up every day to see if it's growing. He waters it, he nurtures it, but he also waits. He knows that the growth happens underground before it ever appears above. That's what relaxing in God means. You've planted your prayers, you've sown your faith, now let Him handle the process. You don't need to force what God has already ordained. In every area of life, relationships, finances, healing, ministry, there comes a point where you must choose between stress and surrender. Stress says, I must make this happen. Surrender says, God will make this happen in His way. The difference is profound. Stress burns you out, surrender builds you up. When you relax, your soul reconnects with heaven's rhythm. You stop wrestling with outcomes and start rejoicing in promises. God never asked you to figure everything out. He asked you to trust Him in everything. That's why Jesus said, come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. The rest He offers is not just physical, but spiritual. A rest that fills you with assurance that He's already taken care of what's troubling you. When you live in that kind of rest, you walk with divine composure. You don't panic at delays because you know delays are just preparations. You don't fear detours because detours are just divine redirections. Relaxing in God is the most powerful declaration of faith you can make. It tells heaven and hell alike that you know who your Father is. It says, I may not understand what's happening, but I know who is in control. And when you reach that place, your heart becomes unshakable. Doors begin to open. Prayers begin to manifest. And peace begins to overflow. So no, relaxing is not quitting. It's trusting more deeply. It's letting go of control without letting go of hope. It's choosing to be still, not because you have nothing left to do, but because you've done all you can. And now you're letting God do what only He can. When you live with that mindset, you will find strength even in stillness and victory even in silence. For those who truly relax in the Lord will see that everything in time will come to them effortlessly, beautifully, and perfectly according to His will. The power of inner peace is one of the greatest treasures a believer can possess. It is not the peace that depends on quiet surroundings or comfortable circumstances. It is the peace that flows from a heart anchored in God's presence. True peace is not the absence of problems. It is the presence of divine assurance. It is that steady calm within you that whispers God is still in control, even when everything around you seems uncertain. Many people try to find peace through external things. Money, success, relationships, or recognition. But lasting peace can only come from the one who created it. The peace of God is not something you chase. It's something you carry when your spirit is aligned with Him. When you have inner peace, you stop being a prisoner of circumstances. Situations may change. People may disappoint you. Plans may fail. But your spirit remains steady because you know your foundation is in Christ. This peace is a spiritual power. It governs your emotions, protects your thoughts, and keeps your faith strong when fear tries to take over. You can always tell when someone is walking closely with God because their peace speaks louder than their problems. They may be in a storm, but the storm is not in them. That's what happens when you have the peace that comes from above. It guards your heart like a shield. There are times when you pray for God to calm the storm, but instead He calms you. Because sometimes the miracle is not in the storm stopping, it's in you learning to rest in the middle of it. When your inner peace grows stronger than your outer chaos, that's when you begin to experience true spiritual maturity. God doesn't always remove the pressure. Sometimes He uses the pressure to reveal the power of peace inside you. The enemy wants you restless, anxious, and distracted because he knows a peaceful heart is a powerful heart. When you're at peace, you can hear God's voice clearly. But when you're troubled, your mind becomes too loud to receive His direction. Inner peace is the evidence of trust. When you believe that God is working everything together for your good, your spirit stops fighting what it cannot control. You begin to breathe differently, think differently, and respond differently. You no longer react out of fear, but out of faith. You realize that panic does not move God. Peace does. The peace of a believer becomes a testimony to the world that your hope is not built on temporary things. It's the peace that confuses those who expect you to be broken, yet you're still smiling. It's the peace that shows up when you should have lost your mind, but instead found your strength in God. This kind of peace cannot be manufactured. It must be cultivated. You cultivate it through prayer, worship, and spending time in God's Word. The more you fill your heart with His truth, the less space there is for anxiety to live. Peace grows in the soil of trust. Every time you choose to let go of worry and hold on to faith, your peace becomes stronger. Every time you stop trying to fix what only God can fix, your peace deepens. And as peace grows, it becomes a force that influences everything around you. People can feel it when you enter a room. They may not understand it, but they can sense it. Inner peace gives you the strength to make wise decisions. When you're at peace, you don't rush ahead of God. You move at His pace. You stop trying to compete, compare, or control outcomes. You start listening to His timing instead of reacting to pressure. Many believers lose blessings because they act out of panic instead of peace. But when you learn to wait quietly, doors open naturally, and opportunities come without struggle. Peace doesn't mean passivity, it means stability. It means you are no longer tossed back and forth by emotions, but guided by conviction. Even in prayer, peace plays a role. The Bible says, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds." Notice the order. Prayer comes first, then peace follows. Peace is God's way of telling you, "I've got this." When that peace rests upon you, you stop striving and start trusting. You don't need to prove anything, explain everything, or worry about what's next. You just rest in the assurance that God never fails. When your peace is anchored in God, you become unshakable. People may question you, storms may surround you, but nothing can steal your calm because it's not rooted in what you see. It's rooted in who He is. You realize that your peace is your power. It becomes your greatest testimony and your greatest weapon. You win battles, not by shouting louder, but by standing firmer. You overcome not through panic, but through presence, the presence of the Holy Spirit within you. So learn to protect your peace as you would protect your treasure. Don't let anyone or anything steal it. Guard your heart against fear, negativity, and doubt. When you wake up in the morning, choose peace. When you face uncertainty, choose peace. When you can't understand what God is doing, still choose peace. Because peace is not the end of the fight. It's the posture that guarantees victory. When you live in that peace, everything around you begins to align. Doors open, strength rises, and faith grows. That's the power of inner peace. It turns ordinary believers into extraordinary vessels of grace, calm, and unstoppable faith. From worry to worship, that is the divine journey every believer must take if they want to experience peace and victory in life. Worry is the natural reaction of the human mind when things seem out of control, but worship is the supernatural response of the Spirit that knows God is still in charge. Every time you choose worship over worry, you shift the atmosphere around you. You move from the realm of fear to the realm of faith. From human limitation to divine intervention, worry drains your strength, clouds your vision, and weakens your faith. But worship opens the door for God's power to manifest in your life. Worry tries to convince you that everything depends on your effort. It whispers that if you don't act now, everything will fall apart. But worship reminds you that everything depends on God's grace. When you lift your hands and your heart in worship, you are declaring, God, you are bigger than my problems. You are greater than my fears. You are stronger than anything I face. That declaration is what releases peace in your soul. You cannot worry and worship at the same time. One will always silence the other. When your focus shifts from your problem to God's presence, your heart begins to rest. In moments of anxiety, the enemy wants you to keep replaying your fears. He wants your mind trapped in the what-ifs, but worship breaks that cycle. Worship fills your mind with the truth of who God is, instead of the lies of what might happen. When you begin to magnify the Lord, your problems start to look smaller. That doesn't mean the situation changes instantly, but your perspective does. And when your perspective changes, your faith rises. Suddenly, you realize that what seemed impossible for you is simple for God. When Paul and Silas were imprisoned in chains, they could have chosen to worry. They could have cried about their unfair situation. But instead, they chose to worship at midnight. In the darkest part of their night, they sang praises to God. And what happened? The prison doors opened and their chains fell off. That's what happens when you turn worry into worship. Heaven responds. Worship doesn't just lift your spirit. It shakes the foundations of what's holding you back. It invites God into your situation. And wherever God enters, freedom follows. Worship is more than a song. It is a surrender. It's saying, God, I trust you even when I don't understand you. Sometimes you may not have the words to pray, but if you can still whisper His name in worship, that's enough. God responds to a heart that chooses faith over fear. Every time you worship in the middle of worry, you are declaring war on the enemy's lies. You're telling fear that it has no authority in your heart. You're telling doubt that it no longer controls your mind. Worship is a weapon, a spiritual sound that confuses the enemy and strengthens your soul. There's something powerful that happens when you worship in the waiting. It's easy to sing when everything is perfect, but it's in the difficult moments that worship becomes powerful. When you lift your voice through tears and say, God, you are still good, the heavens take notice. Worship in pain carries the fragrance of true faith. It's that kind of worship that touches God's heart deeply. It's what turns trials into testimonies and burdens into blessings. The moment you stop worrying about what's next and start worshiping for what already is, you step into the flow of divine peace. Worry focuses on what's missing. Worship focuses on what's present. Worry says, I don't have enough. Worship says, God is more than enough. Worry magnifies the problem. Worship magnifies the provider. That's why the key to victory is not to wait until the situation improves before you praise. It's to praise until your situation aligns with God's promise. When you worship, you remind your soul that God has never failed before and He won't start now. The truth is, worry will never add anything to your life. It only takes away. Jesus said, who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? Worry drains your energy and steals your joy. But worship fills you with strength. It revives your hope. It lifts your spirit above the storm. When you worship, you begin to feel heaven's rhythm beating inside of you. The fear that once controlled you begins to fade, replaced by a holy confidence that everything is working for your good. To move from worry to worship, you must make a daily decision. Every morning when your mind begins to wander toward what could go wrong, turn your heart toward gratitude. Thank God for what He has already done. When you feel anxious, start singing a song of praise. When you're uncertain, remind yourself of His promises. Worship doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as whispering, Lord, I trust you. That whisper is enough to silence the storm inside you. When your heart learns to worship instead of worry, you will discover a peace that surpasses understanding. You'll begin to live with joy even before the breakthrough. You'll find strength even when the outcome is unclear. Because worship connects you directly to the source of all peace, God Himself. And when your life becomes an altar of worship, you'll see how every worry that once overwhelmed you turns into a testimony of His faithfulness. That's the beauty of choosing worship over worry. It doesn't just change your emotions, it transforms your entire life. God's promise of "it shall come to pass" is one of the most comforting and powerful truths a believer can hold on to. Those words carry the weight of heaven's authority. When God says something will come to pass, it is not a suggestion, it is a guarantee. His word cannot return void. It must accomplish what He has spoken. The challenge for most believers is not in hearing the promise, but in surviving the process. God speaks instantly, but fulfillment often unfolds gradually. Between the promise and its manifestation, there is a waiting season that tests your faith, molds your character, and prepares your heart for what's coming. When God gives a promise, it's already finished in the spiritual realm. The moment He said it, it became truth. But in the natural world, you must walk through a process to see it manifested. That process is not punishment, it's preparation. God uses time to develop in you the strength needed to carry His blessings. If you receive it too soon, you might not be ready for its weight. So, while you're waiting, God is not delaying. He's building you. He's working behind the scenes, arranging divine connections, removing distractions, and shaping your heart to fit the blessing He's bringing. The phrase "it shall come to pass" means that your current situation is temporary. The struggle, the pain, the confusion, none of it is permanent. It shall come to pass, not to stay. Every storm has an expiration date. Every dark season has a sunrise attached to it. God never leaves His children stuck in a place of despair. Even when you can't see movement, His word is already in motion. Heaven's calendar is different from yours, but it's always on time. What looks like delay to you is often divine synchronization. There are moments when doubt creeps in. You start wondering if you really heard from God, if the promise was real, or if something went wrong. Those are the times when you must hold on to His word more tightly than ever. God never lies. His promises are as eternal as His nature. Think of Joseph. God gave him a dream as a young man, but before that dream came to pass, he was betrayed, enslaved, and imprisoned. Everything around him looked opposite to what God had promised. Yet, through every setback, God was working. The prison was not punishment, it was positioning. When the time was right, the promise came to pass, and Joseph became second in command over Egypt. You may be walking through a season that feels like contradiction. You heard God say one thing, but you're seeing the opposite. That's when faith must rise above feelings. God's promises are not invalidated by your circumstances. They stand above time, emotions, and human logic. When He says it shall come to pass, He means that nothing can stop it. Not the enemy, not people, not delays, not even your past mistakes. His word carries its own power to fulfill itself. All you have to do is stay connected to Him. The secret is to rest in His timing. Impatience is the enemy of promise. When you try to make things happen your own way, you end up with Ishmael instead of Isaac. But when you wait on God's perfect time, what you receive will not bring sorrow, it will bring joy. The promise fulfilled at the right moment carries peace with it. You won't have to force it, chase it, or manipulate it. It will come naturally, effortlessly, because it was designed for you. God's timing always reveals His wisdom. When you feel weary, remind yourself that God has never failed. Every prophecy He has ever spoken has come true. The same God who parted the Red Sea, who raised Lazarus from the dead, who opened barren wombs and calmed raging storms, that same God is still speaking over your life. If He said, your miracle will come, it will come. It doesn't matter how impossible it looks or how long it takes. His promise is stronger than any obstacle. Sometimes the greatest act of faith is simply to keep believing when nothing seems to change. It shall come to pass means your story will not end in disappointment. It means your tears will not be wasted. It means your faith will not go unrewarded. God is too faithful to lie, too loving to forget, and too powerful to fail. Every moment of waiting is proof that He's preparing something worth the wait. The promise may tarry, but it will speak at the appointed time. And when it does, you'll understand why you had to go through what you did. You'll look back and realize that every delay was divine direction. Every setback was set up, and every test was training for the testimony that was about to unfold. So don't let discouragement steal your hope. Keep declaring His word over your life. Keep saying, it shall come to pass, even when your heart feels weary. Those words are not wishful thinking. They are prophetic truth. Heaven responds to faith-filled declarations. When you speak God's word, you align your reality with His promise. One day, the things you prayed for, cried for, and waited for will suddenly appear. The doors will open, the healing will manifest, the vision will become reality. You'll realize that God never forgot you. He was simply bringing everything together in His perfect way. The promise will arrive not a minute too early or too late, but right on time. And when it does, all the pain, all the tears, all the waiting will make sense, because everything God has ever promised will surely come to pass. Not by your effort, but by His faithfulness.